Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 26th, 2014 meeting of the NIC Board of Trustees. As we start all meetings, if you would please rise and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There is a verification of the quorum. All of the trustees are present, and I don't believe we have had anybody sign up as a guest. And so we're next to review the minutes, and there are two meetings since our last formal meeting. We had our formal meeting was on February 26, 2014. And are there any additions, corrections to the minutes for February 26, 2014? If none, then they'll be deemed approved as reported. The next meeting was the special meeting we had on March 13th, 2014. Are there any comments, additions, or corrections to those minutes? So, hearing none, those minutes will be approved as reported. We have no one sign up for public comment. We're moving right along, aren't we? At this point in time, I'd indicated before what I'd like to do, hopefully at every meeting, but certainly from time to time, is to just remind ourselves of the mission of North Idaho College. So I'm going to take the opportunity to read it at this time again. North Idaho College meets the diverse educational needs of students, employers, and the northern Idaho communities it serves through a commitment to student success, educational excellence, community engagement, and lifelong learning. And with that, I would invite Heather Erickson to introduce us to Footsteps in our Celebrating Success section.
Well, thank you so much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Dunlap, and guests. I'm Heather Erickson. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Development. This is Josh Swan, ASNIC Senator, and Curly Lawson, Veterans and Multicultural Advisor. Let me start by saying I'm so thankful to have the opportunity to talk to you about this program. It is such an impactful program, and it takes an enormous amount of dedication and hard work by everyone involved. But the learning and growth that results is well worth the efforts. The Footsteps program is a series of interactive exhibits that highlight issues of social injustice and oppression. After being escorted through each exhibit, participants have a chance to discuss their reactions with a facilitator in the Room of Hope. The Room of Hope also offers resources for students to get involved in the topics that are covered, ways to make a difference after they've been educated on these issues. It is organized by the Footsteps Committee as part of Diversity Events, and the funds to produce this event come from ASNIC and the Diversity Events Committee. The strength of the program really comes from the passion of the students. They pick each of their topics, and their passion to each of the topics that they pick really drives the program. And so that, for me, I think that's probably the most important success and celebration that needs to happen is the students that actually produce the exhibits. We had 6 student groups participate this year: the Veterans Club, Sociology Club, Gender Sexuality Alliance, Actors, Vagabonds and Such, or the Drama Club, American Indian Student Alliance, and Phi Theta Kappa. We have a short video to show you, and throughout the video we've included quotes from the Room of Hope, the wall in the Room of Hope, and each of these quotes really just show the success and the impact that the program has. That list could have been much longer. There's lots and lots of people to thank in the producing of this exhibit. So each exhibit is meant to make participants feel like they are living in the oppressive situation. We recommend this program only to mature audiences, and we require a consent form for every participant with an acknowledgement that they don't have to participate if they don't want to. It's very eye-opening and very impactful, and so we want to make sure that everyone that's going through the exhibits really has an understanding of what they're about to experience. We start advertising for proposals in the spring semester, so I'll start that at this next meeting, at the next interclub council meeting, just in a couple weeks. And they're due in late October. The application is very extensive. Students must outline all the details of their exhibit and the research and support for their topic. Once the proposals are accepted, the committee works with each of the groups to make sure to bring their topics to life. On average, the student groups put over 50 hours of research, planning, and development into each of the exhibits, and their hard work pays off. We had 503 participants this year, and the majority are students, but we also have some community members in that as well. Over 60 volunteers helped to make put the event on, and it's like I said before, it's a large event, and we couldn't do it without everyone's help. Because of the learning opportunities that this program provides, the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations will be honoring Footsteps at their annual banquet at the end of April. So I'm gonna let Josh and Curly talk a little bit too.
How's it going, everybody? After about 2 years of being on the Senate, she finally managed to get me up here to speak in front of you. So I'll say that Footsteps is amazing at the awareness that it brings about, as well as the motivation for change here on campus. Highlights a lot of issues that people don't even realize were going on. And I've been involved in the Footsteps program for the past 3 years. The first year was just as a participant, no clue what I was getting into and just going through the experience. And then the past 2 years I've been involved at both the diversity events committee level as well as on the planning exhibits committees. So I've helped out with a couple of the exhibits through the past couple of years individually. And it's been an amazing experience. Additionally, I think Heather deserves a great round of applause here because she puts a lot of work into this. There's about 2 weeks where if you need to speak to Heather at all you hear back is Footsteps, sorry. So she definitely does amazing at organizing and coordinating all the drive and passion that goes into Footsteps, and I think she deserves a round of applause.
She definitely deserves that round of applause. The value of Footsteps, for me, noticing that this is something that students conceptualize. These are projects, these are exhibits that students determined that they wanted to show, to increase awareness about, or to inform other people about, to share something that was very powerful to them, very important to them. And what a lot of people didn't understand, and maybe even some of the students didn't understand, that we actually went beyond our core values of community engagement. At the end of Footsteps, students were able to engage in community improvement. They were able to go out and see their community in a way that they hadn't been able to see it before, address issues that they were unaware of, but also have the tools and the resources to make that improvement. They didn't walk away saying, oh my gosh, it's so terrible, those bad things happened. They walked away saying, I am prepared to deal with those bad things when they happen. That is the real power of Footsteps and why I'm so incredibly grateful I was able to be a part of it.
Questions?
Any questions? Christy?
Mr. Chair, I guess what Curly just spoke to, really the power of coping skills is so important in so many areas that young people are dealing with these days, even old people like me. Coping skills really are integral to everything we do, and if the program brings about that for anyone, that's incredible, whether it be learning about what our veterans have been through, learning about gender identity issues that our students face, different types of discrimination. I think it's incredible that the students have put these kind of programs together and that they obviously value them and appreciate it and get a real emotional experience out of it. And it's not the college instructors coming together and saying, this is what you need to know about your future society. It's our students saying, let us share with you. And so that's really incredible, and you'll certainly deserve any recognition at the Human Rights Banquet.
Thank you.
Ron?
Heather, I've been to 68 countries around the world, so I've been very blessed to just get to go see people, and the more you see, the more you listen, the more that you understand that we're all living with different lives and different prejudices, but as we come together, the true education is the relationship, that when you see somebody that you perceive as different, or you perceive that these people are not the same as you, and you get a chance to put your guard down, he's not judging, you're not judging, and when you get all done with him, you find yourself hugging on this person. It doesn't matter what was the differences before. So I guess my question to be with you is that how do we move people to an educational process that says, put your guard down and just get to know the person and love the person and show them the peace and the patience and the kindness that should come with every interaction with somebody, and not be judgmental, because my understanding of prejudice is that you've already made a decision on that person before they ever open their mouth because of the way they look or the way they feel. So what are we doing about knocking those walls down and forcing people to be open-minded and to be educated that we're all the same?
Well, when we started Footsteps, I really started this process a little over 5 years ago. We were looking for something that would show that. The first step in that educational process is awareness. And we were looking for a method, a mode to bring our students to that awareness. That's the first step. And so that's really what this program really tries to do, is it tries to allow people to experience somebody else's life, somebody else, the way that somebody else feels or is oppressed. And so that's the first step in all of those wonderful things that you mentioned. So that's really the purpose of this particular event.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just real quick. Heather, I think for some people watching this, they may think, oh, there they go again, that hotbed of liberals. But what I think is really important, when you started off, you talked about how this is funded, and it's funded through ASNIC, and so ASNIC is our student body representatives, and they do have their own budget with their own money. And so I just think it's, I hope that puts to rest that anybody who may not agree with the message, this isn't being done forcefully in any way, and the students have brought it forward themselves.
And I think the other point to that would be that everyone is welcome to submit a proposal. I'll have, like I said, I mentioned I'll start promoting proposals here in a few weeks. And so every student group, we've even had other outside communities help produce exhibits before. So really the committee would welcome all proposals.
Right.
Or Ron? I'm sorry.
Well, in defense of the conservatives here that are not supposed to be really sensitive to this is, man, we got to be really careful, because sometimes the prejudice comes this way, where that you assume that because that you are trying to be more of a conservative, that you can't be compassionate to those that have drug or alcohol problems, that are homeless, that are of a different persuasion. And I think that we can't. Here we are, where we would say that's prejudice in our way. Give us a chance, because you'd be surprised how many people that are on the conservative side of the table that have the same love and compassion and want the world peace and understanding. So,
Thank you.
and we can get along, the conservatives and the flaming liberals.
Moderate, independent.
Judy?
I think you have identified the value of education. That's what we're all about. Thank you for your work.
Any other comments or questions? I want to thank all of you very much for the presentation and helping us understand, and the people who view this understand, what Footsteps is all about, and what the student body here finds valuable in helping to educate all of us about the trials and tribulations of life and the way to get through it. So I want to thank you all very much for that.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Our next agenda item is an update on the Dyke Road tree study. We had a joint meeting with the city of Coeur d'Alene a week ago, I think, and we had an update on the Dyke Road tree study, and it was broadcast, so we'll skip that item on the report, having fulfilled it in the joint session. And we'll move right on to the constituent reports. Benai Achievers on Verasnik.
Good evening, Chairman Howard, other members of the board, Mr. Lyons, Dr. Dunlap, my constituents and guests. Thank you all for being here. And once again, it's just a privilege and a blessing to see you all. Just a few things in my report today. Since we finalized our fiscal year 2015 ASNIC budget as of last month on the 24th, we've been further analyzing the impact of the reduction in our budget and what that implies. In meeting with John Totten and Jacob Rothrock, our outdoor pursuits coordinators, over the last couple weeks, we've discussed where we should go moving forward. A need was realized to form a stronger connection between the student leaders and outdoor pursuits. We decided the best action to take would be to create an outdoor pursuits advisory board within ASNIC. And this is purposed to collaborate and form a stronger connection. It'll work towards improving communication among the persons in outdoor pursuits. The resort recreation management students will be able to get involved with student government students in service on this advisory board, as well as some more coordination between our advisors and coordinators. And really the purpose of this is to get input from students in planning events, receive feedback from students on event outcomes, and to just overall form that better connection. So I'm really looking forward to this. John was very active in bringing this to our attention, and we were able to work together and propose this advisory board. So I'm really looking forward to getting the advisory board created and having outdoor pursuits be really active in that process. One more thing is that, well, just moving on right along with my report, we have an update on one of our projects. ASNIC Senator Richard Fortman has been working on a project of providing students with more information about tuition and fees, and that has progressed as he has worked with our business office. Sarah Garcia over here has been extremely helpful in working with him to establish a tuition calculator, which to my knowledge should be made available for students by the end of this week. So that's exciting news for students, and thank you so much, Sarah, for taking the time to meet with Richard. One exciting thing is our Student Events Board held an NIC's first ever spring formal dance this last Saturday. I saw Graydon Stanley there and Lita Burns there and several others. The event was a huge, huge success. There were over 150 attendees, which included students and their family members, faculty, staff, and administration members. Many students came out to enjoy a great time of dance lessons, dinner, and more dancing, and listen to Jazz Northwest, which was hired to play music for the evening. I'd like to thank Tiana Wood, one of our student events coordinators, who did an outstanding job taking on the planning of this event, and the rest of the student events team as well. It was really a success, and I just want to thank all of them for doing that. Yesterday, the student government team from the College of Western Idaho visited us here at NIC. There were 4 of them total, along with an accompanying interim advisor. The student body president from CWI, Joy Dieter, whom some of you may have met at the state legislative luncheon, was also here. And this was really an amazing experience where we were able to meet and greet a little bit further. Some of them I had never met personally. And they really gained a lot from this experience as they are a new student government. So they were able to come here and basically shadow us. And they said at the end of the day that they really learned a lot from being here. They attended our executive session in the morning. We met with them one-on-one in between the 10 o'clock and the noon hour, and then at noon we had our board meeting, which they were also able to attend. And then throughout the rest of the day, they toured the campus, got to see a little bit of Coeur d'Alene, and then we also had dinner with them. So that was an amazing experience, and it was awesome to have them be able to join us. Currently, I'm writing our ASNIC March newsletter that will be out for the student body on Friday, right before spring break, which I'm very excited about. I have spring fever, to be honest. I want to get outside and play. Our outdoor pursuits team is taking a group of students to Hell's Canyon to go backpacking, and I hope they have a lot of fun. So and I hope you guys have a spring break even though you're not students. So that's all I have. Are there any questions today?
Any questions of Benai? Thank you very much for the report.
Thank you, Ken.
Next is Staff Assembly, Nancy Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman Howard, Board of Trustees, and President Dunlap. Good evening, everyone. At the March Staff Assembly meeting, we had Mike Weller, who is the coordinator for the new wood products manufacturing program located at Workforce Training Center, come to give an overview of that program. We also had Greta Gregson, a student from the Speak Out Communication Club, attend to announce their professional clothing drive. Similar to Dress for Success, the purpose of the drive was to provide students with a set of professional clothes to have for any prospective interviews they may have. The club set up boxes across the campus to collect clothing, shoes, and accessories. They had the items cleaned and have them organized for a free professional attire giveaway for students today, tomorrow, and Friday. They received a huge response and have a large selection of clothing for the students. A couple of things that'll be coming up this semester that are always fun and exciting. First, we are currently nominating coworkers for the 4 different Staff Appreciation Awards. As you know, the awards are given out at the commencement breakfast. We also will be seeking nominations and electing a new Staff Assembly Board in April. The new officers will take over at our May Staff Assembly meeting. And of course, commencement will be here soon. And that is always a very rewarding and enjoyable time of year here at NIC. Excuse me. That ends my report, and I will entertain questions.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Next is for Faculty Assembly, Michelle Lippert.
Good evening, Chairman Howard, trustees, President Dunlap, and guests. With midterms in the rearview mirror, spring break within sight, and summer just over the horizon, there's a growing sense that this year is coming to an end. A major task being addressed by the faculty at this time is the alignment of our courses with the statewide core matrix. The committees will begin meeting immediately after spring break. They are tasked with examining all our courses identified as being core to see if they align with the new state standards. This is a massive undertaking. The Executive Committee of the Faculty Assembly met to review the recommendation of Meet and Confer. We would like to commend the committee for their hard work and to affirm their recommendations. At our last Faculty Assembly meeting, we heard reports from the Teaching Focus Committee and Meet and Confer. The Assembly asked questions of and made suggestions to both of these committees. The Senate report occupied a great deal of our time as the Senate sought input from the Assembly on policies currently under review. Elections are upon us. Nominations for Assembly positions and the Senate have been made from the floor and via email. It is now my task to contact all the nominees to ensure that they actually wish to serve. Nothing like being nominated while you're out of the room. We will hold our elections at our May meeting. That concludes my report. Are there any questions about my report?
Christie.
Michelle, a couple of questions. The work on aligning the core, that's, you're right, going to be a huge task. So what is the plan for that? Is that going to go on through the summer months, or maybe President could?
As I understand it, and Larry is here who would probably answer that, it's the possibility that they will be meeting during the summers. Is that correct, Larry?
Initially, we're going to focus on spring. There may be some meetings in the summer, but that's not going to be part of it.
Why don't you repeat that, because I'm not sure it was picked up by all the microphones.
Dr. Briggs said that initially we'll be focusing on meeting in the spring. There may be meetings in the summer, but it might not occur, so.
Okay. And then my second question, you talked about Meet and Confer. So was there a recommendation that was passed along to the President's Cabinet?
Yes.
I'm not asking for what it was, I'm just,
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. And I believe you'll hear it when you get the budget report, is that correct, Dr. Dunlap?
What was the first part?
The meet and confer recommendation, that will
Yes,
come to the
that will
board.
come at the next board meeting as part of the first reading for the budget. And prior to that, Sarah and I will be meeting with each of you individually to go over the different components of the budget and where we actually are with the budget prior to that first reading.
thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Michelle, thank you very much. The next report is for the Senate. Audrey Bourne.
Good evening, Chairman Howard, members of the board, President Dunlap. Tonight I will share with you an update from our March Senate meeting. A second reading was approved for the revision of the policy and procedure on grading. In addition, the revision of the procedure on student withdrawals and revision of the policy and new procedure on textbook adoption were approved for a second reading. These documents will be forwarded to the President's Cabinet for review. A second reading to revise the policy and procedure on tenure and the policy and procedure on program evaluation were tabled. We are currently in the process of reviewing the revisions to the following policies: establishment of new positions, filling of vacant positions with benefits, employment of relatives, campaigning for public office, probation, promotion, demotion, and transfer of employees, retention of records, and resignations, layoffs, and dismissals. In addition, we are in the process of reviewing the revisions to the following procedures: time, place, and manner of exercising free speech at NIC, creation of college policy and procedure, filling of vacant positions with benefits, and corrective action. Senate will meet for a special session tomorrow so that we may complete our March agenda. And that concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Next is the President's report. President Joe Dunlap.
Chairman Howard, trustees, and colleagues, good evening. First of all, I would like to present this award to our trustees that was presented to the college at the last Chamber of Commerce meeting. And it is the Friends of Leadership Award. It's an annual award, and this plaque says, "The Coeur d'Alene Chamber of Commerce, the Friends of Leadership Award, presented to North Idaho College in recognition of your continued leadership in the greater Coeur d'Alene area. Presented by Leadership Coeur d'Alene Committee 2014. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to present that.
Do we get to keep this in our home for a month apiece?
You can,
Circulate it?
actually, I think you have to wear it around your neck.
Thank you.
We have been going through the process of looking for a VP of Finance and Business, and as you may recall, that position resulted in a failed search last time. This time, we've had 72 applications for that position. This week, there are 11 online interviews that will be completed by Friday, and then the screening committee will determine who the finalists will be. And I've asked for 5 finalists that we will look at inviting to campus for forums and formal interviews. Mark Browning is chairing that, and I appreciate him doing that for a second time. Each year, we have had what has been called Employee Day, where we gather and try and fit in as much training and professional development and camaraderie as we can in one day. And that has caused concern because of the different employee groups that have different schedules throughout the year. And so what we have decided to do is to develop an annual training program for the college that will provide opportunities for professional development for faculty and staff that will be presented throughout the year, numerous times, at different times during the day, so everybody will have an opportunity for those professional development opportunities. And there are really two areas that we will focus on. One is the core competencies that relate to what we believe is important for employees and what employees would like to see for professional development. And the second category would be mandatory training, which relates to compliance issues. So for example, FERPA training would be a compliance issue that all employees should attend. And thus far, we do not track that particularly well, but we have the mechanism to do that. So the process will be is that we are going to conduct a needs assessment, and that'll be done towards the end of April. We will then prioritize the needs and create organizational training objectives that we believe are important, and then that program will be, that schedule will be developed, and we hopefully will have that in place by September for this next year. That project is being headed up by our HR office and Aaron Norville in particular. And so we're looking forward to that because that will provide some tremendous opportunities for our employees. It'll allow us to track the training our employees have had, and in particular with the compliance related training, by being able to document that will mitigate some liability issues that we would potentially have. Last year, for the first time ever, this college participated in the Community College Survey of Student Engagement. It's a national survey that colleges may elect to participate in that looks at the level of engagement that students have with the college, that they have with their faculty. And you have a copy of the report. I handed it out to you. It looks like this. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I will talk about the areas that we have done very well and the areas that we need to improve in. The benchmarks that this survey looks at are active and collaborative learning, student effort, academic challenge, student-faculty interaction, and support for learners. And this is an effort for us to be reflective and provide continuous quality improvement. Typically, this survey is done once every 2 or 3 years by an institution. We did it last year, but we're going to do it again this year. And we will then be on the same cycle with the other 3 community colleges in the state, and we will be able to benchmark ourselves with those colleges as well as similar colleges throughout the country. In the area where we had the aspects of highest student engagement, it included answers to the questions that students received feedback from instructors towards improving their performance. It included discussed ideas with your readings or classes with others outside of class, in other words, students, family members, and coworkers. It asked the number of books you read on your own or not assigned for personal enjoyment or academic achievement. It looked at the number of written papers or reports of any length. And we also did well on the area of preparing for class, studying, reading, writing, rehearsing, and doing homework or other activities related to your program. Now, what that really translates into is the academic rigor of our programs, and we did very well in terms of similar institutions. In the areas where we scored the lowest in student engagement relates to support for learners. And in these areas, we scored below below similar colleges. encouraging contact among students from different economic, social, racial, or ethnic backgrounds, providing the support you need to thrive socially, frequency, the academic advising and planning, the frequency of career counseling, and the frequency of lab or computer labs. And what this suggests, and as we drill deeper down into the data, and this is only the highlights of the data, it suggests that the students are very pleased with the quality of our student services, but they don't voluntarily access many of those services. And so when we look at the grant, for example, that Molly Chrysler presented a while back, we included things such as intrusive advising. We have now required orientations for students. And we also will focus on career planning. And so these are areas we know we need to improve, and we know we need to engage students more and maybe give them less choices in the matter. And these are areas that relate to student success at similar organizations. So I wanted you to have this report, and we can discuss this further if you would like and drill down further into the data, but I wanted to give you the summary of the report, give you the background of it, and let you know what we're trying to do in terms of quality improvement. Additionally, you've heard me talk about the voluntary framework of accountability, and the voluntary framework of accountability is a system used to track cohorts of students, measure their success, and it categorizes them in ways that are peculiar or particular to community colleges. For example, workforce training, career and technical education, and adult basic education. Those are areas that are tracked in the voluntary framework of accountability. It's a system that was designed for community colleges, by community colleges, and over this past year, we have been one of the colleges that have been beta testing it. CSI and CWI also are participating in that, and next year we will move from beta to the actual implementation and be able to use that data. And what that means to us is that we will be comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, whereas in the past, we may have measured student success differently, we may have tracked students differently, but now we have a standardized system, and so when we talk to the legislature, we can speak with one voice and a common voice that represents that we are measuring how our students are performing in the same manner from one institution to another. Excuse me. I've got a few announcements that I want to make. First of all is that our GED graduation is planned for May 8th at 7 p.m. in Boswell, and I would certainly invite all of you to attend if you can. Also, the week of April 7th through the 12th is American Heritage Week, American Indian Heritage Week, and is sponsored by the American Indian Student Alliance. And you each have a flyer at your place that lists all of the events that will take place. And last year it was a very successful event, and we're looking forward to it being a very successful event this year as well. I received a letter from Mayor Widmeyer that I would like to read to you because it reflects the willingness of the trustees to cooperate with the City of Coeur d'Alene. It says, on behalf of myself, the council, and city staff, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to meet with us last Thursday at our joint council/NIC Board of Trustee workshop. I enjoyed the robust discussion of areas of mutual concern, including the dike levee recertification, Four Corners project, campus security, shared gym space, and future education corridor facilities. You have my commitment to work with you as partners towards mutually beneficial solutions that will benefit the college and the community. I appreciate the open dialogue and exchange of ideas and look forward to exploring additional partnership opportunities with NIC in the future. I want to publicly recognize Curly Lawson, our Veterans Coordinator. He is taking a new job with the Veterans Administration out of Spokane. And it will allow him to use his MSW degree related to counseling to a greater extent. And so, Curly, I want to thank you for your service and what you've done for this college and the Veterans Program. You certainly have made that into a very supportive and robust program. Now, Curly agreed to take the job with one condition, and that is that NIC remain one of his clients. And so he assured me he will be on campus 1 day per week while he works out of Seattle. So I'm going to hold Curly to that. So Curly, thank you for your service. It was mentioned that spring break is next week, and during that time, Dr. Lita Burns will be the acting president. Yvette and I will be out of town, along with, I think, several other individuals for that break. I have passed out a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm not going to go over it, but it relates to funding options for our CTE facility. And the week after spring break, we will try and meet individually with trustees to talk about these options and answer questions. And this was put together by Piper Jaffray, which is the bond advisor to the college. And so this will give you an opportunity to look at it in advance and formulate any questions that you may have. And then lastly, we handed out a report to you on the spring enrollment. There is nothing new in that report. You're well aware of where our enrollment is. And at a future meeting, if you want, we can provide a more detailed report, but this will give you an opportunity to look through that and formulate any questions that you may have with regard to our spring enrollment. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report.
Any questions of President Dunlap?
Go, Todd.
I'll ask one, then you can ask one.
Okay.
When we look at the spring enrollment report, and it gives us quite a bit of information, but it looks like everything is centered around the credit enrollment. I know Ken has mentioned on several occasions, I think his wife takes a yoga class. I'm kind of curious to know what sort of participation, community involvement, student involvement we have in non-credit courses, and how many of those, and what sort of head count we have for those sorts of things. You know, do we have 20? Do we have 200? I'm kind of curious in the participation level of that, and how self-sustaining that is. You know, in the overall budget process, we seem to be talking about, again, the for-credit transfer academic portion, but we're obviously offering classes that extend beyond that core mission, if you will. And I'm just kind of curious if there's lots of people taking that. Has the yoga class got 5 or 50?
Yeah, it depends on the class that an individual takes, and there's really 2 categories. One is workforce training, and the other is continuing education. And last year, we served approximately 6,000 students through our Workforce Training Center in those different courses and programs. Excuse me. I don't have the metrics handy, and we can certainly provide that to you in a report. I will tell you this, that the Workforce Training Center last year, for the first time, operated in the black. Prior to that, it was operating in the red, and Mike Myers and Lita and Marie Price have done an excellent job in making sure that we have moved into the positive side of the ledger with those programs. And so, Mr. Chair, if you'd like, at a future meeting, we can come back and have Marie Price report out on those non-credit courses that are offered through our Workforce Training Center.
Is your
Oh, that'd be
question?
great. Yeah, again, I'm just trying to get a handle on
Sure.
that, wondering what the magnitude of that is.
Yep.
How
Yeah,
that fits
it's
in.
bigger than most people realize, yeah.
I suspected that would be the case, but I had no empirical
You bet.
data on which to base that.
Christie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank your wife for supporting our non-credit programs. Thank you very much, and you're in great shape. I would like to, Dr. Dunlap, definitely come back to these key findings. I think they're so important to everything we do here.
Yep.
And so I would like to drill down a little more. Certainly, we can't tonight. But it's fascinating to me, some of what's come back for us. So I think it would be helpful that we do put this back on the agenda in the future and really kind of try to go through the layers and help us understand as a board, maybe where we should be putting more resources.
Right.
Maybe less resources. There's just a lot of good information in this, so thank you.
And we would be happy to do that. I forgot to mention that the SESI staff, the Community College Survey of Student Engagement staff, will be out here June 2nd and 3rd to do training with our folks and help them understand how to better utilize the data and how to drill down deeper into the data. And so I would suggest that after that training takes place, maybe the most appropriate time to bring this topic back, and we'll probably have Kylene, who manages this, along with Graydon, make that presentation.
Perfect, thank you.
Just a minute. Ron?
Joe, could you do me a favor and expand a little bit on the resources that you use when you're doing your predictions? I mean, we caught ourselves a little bit underestimating the fall that we were going to see over the last couple of years, and you've already came aggressively out with an additional, after 11% reduction, down another 10% for the next year. What resources are available to you? You go to our #1 high schools, Lake City and Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls High School, the 3 high schools, the biggest feeders to here, and do a head count. And I mean, what's available? How do you feel strong enough that 10% is either going to be where we're at and it's not going to be worse than that?
Yeah, what I said, or what we had indicated, was that we anticipate up to another 10% drop next year. And there is really no scientific way to measure that. We know for a fact that our enrollment is directly inversely proportional to what is happening in the economy. And we also look at national trends in terms of enrollment. And just by way of example, and I'm going to ask Mark, he was at a conference here a couple days ago, and the question was asked, what's been the downturn in enrollment, or what has been the trend in enrollment at your institutions? And Mark, could you explain what came back on that?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I sit on a national board for the Council for Marketing Public Relations, and it's a 15-member board, and I asked fellow board members from all 7 regions of the country what was happening with their enrollment. To a person, every institution is down, with one exception, one lone college in California. So 14 of the 15 were down, and they range anywhere from 4%, 5%, upwards to 10, 11, 12. So enrollment is down everywhere, and they're a year removed from where we are at now. We're a little ahead of the curve, which would tell you that we're hopeful that we'll pull back up sooner than they will, but it is down everywhere across the country.
Thank you.
Braden, do you want to make any comments about enrollment predictions as well?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and President Dunlap as well. You might, as you go through the enrollment, look at the last page where Kylene Lloyd gives some narrative relative to our predictions. And part of what we understand has happened here with our enrollment as well is we had such a huge bubble, huge growth of enrollment, and we're coming somewhat off of that now. And if you'll look, for the first time in several years, our new student enrollment was actually up a little bit this spring semester. while we're certainly, I think we're within the right boundaries of our prediction next year. We hope 10% is the worst. If we get better news than that, it's easy to recover from that. It's much more difficult, of course, as you know, when the news is worse than what you anticipate. But as we look forward, if that trend of new students attending continues over the next 2 or 3 years, then we'll get past the bubble and see a slight, not a gigantic increase as we had 3 or 4 years ago, but a slight increase, and we'll recover from that huge growth that occurred over those 3 or 4 years when the economy was so bad. So that's the optimistic point of view as we move forward. We're expecting to be better 2 or 3 years down the road.
Additionally, when the state allocates based on workload adjustment, as our enrollment goes up, they only fund us at 67% of that enrollment growth. And I spoke with Mike Rush yesterday, and because I drew the short straw and am the president of the College and University President's Council, and we were developing the agenda for the next meeting. And one of the items we're putting on the agenda is, why doesn't the state fund up enrollment growth at 100%? Because what ends up happening as we grow, and they fund up 67%, then where do we make up that difference? And invariably it relates to local property taxes and or tuition or other mechanisms, whether it's contributing with grants and that sort of thing. So the long-winded explanation, Trustee Nielsen, is that there is no scientific 100% accurate way of measuring or forecasting what our enrollment would be or will be. And it's based to a large extent on trends. It's based on what we know happens in the economy. And it's based on some subjectivity. And so I would prefer to err on the high side rather than the low side. And that's what happened this year. We erred on the low side and therefore ended up reducing our budget in the first semester this year. And we were able to do that effectively. But I would have preferred to have erred on the other side.
Follow-up to that, Joe, is that when you look at this report, it talks about over 80% of our total enrollment comes from the state of Idaho. So
Right.
we don't seem to get outside the state very well, or can't necessarily track that. What's interesting is about 70% of our enrollment comes from 4 local high schools: Lake City,
Right.
Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, and Lakeland. So do we do a really good job of spending time in those 4 high schools at the halfway point of their senior year, talking about financing options, education that goes with it? As we talk about everything, it's all about education. So do we educate them about the best value education you get in the state is here, and that transferable skills that you're able to transfer? Do we do a good job of that, do you believe?
I think we could do a better job of that. And in terms of the specifics, though, I'm going to ask Graydon, because he manages those programs that do the outreach programs to the high school.
But before Graydon speaks, I'd like to talk about the 4 years, the slide since Graydon's been here. So, but go ahead, Graydon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, trustees, President Dunlap. Thank you. I think our staff does an excellent job in those areas. We spend more time in our 5-county region, and furthermore, we spend more time in those feeder schools than any other place. It may be members of our admissions office who are out making presentations. We have the near-to-peer folks that were a part of a state initiative that work closely with us and are in each one of those big feeder schools that are promoting higher ed. Our activities, our participation in graduations, our participation in all their different events. I think we're more invested in those schools than any other place and put the greatest of our resources. Can we do better? Certainly. Just today, part of what I was looking at was the number of high school graduates over the last 5 years from all of our high schools throughout the 5-county region, and looking at those trends, and then looking at how many of those students are actually enrolling. And it was interesting that in some of the trending some of our smaller schools, and this may not surprise you, like Priest River, Priest River is one that's grown dramatically for us. That's not uncommon for community colleges to attract a larger percentage of those students from the smaller schools that value the education that we offer. Students often from large feeder schools, even though we get a fairly big number, think that they're going to go to the University of Idaho or go out of state or to bigger universities until a little financial reality hits them, and then they choose to come here. But we're really focusing on, in the next 2 to 3 years, is capturing a bigger market share of what are our bread and butter students, looking at the students that go to high school in this 5-county region and increasing the market share of those number of students that are available to us. Those are our students on our home court, and we need to do a better job telling them our story. So we'll be better with that.
Hang on just a minute. Todd.
All right. It's a three-parter, though, Evan. The first is kind of a comment/request, and I'm mixing between the two different studies or documents that I'm looking at. The first one is, and Graydon had to know he wasn't going to get away today without this. He had indicated to me that we would hopefully get an update on our intrusive counseling in the next couple times, and then I had requested it be on this agenda, but it didn't look like it made it. So I'm hopeful in April or May we're going to see that, since we're looking at that's being one of our areas of low student engagement, and we've been working on that with the pilot program, and of course then we had the grant, and those two kind of dovetail together. So hopefully we'll see something soon. So I guess that's my comment and my request. The second is just an observation. I noticed that our enrollment, both in headcount and FTE, have already reverted back lower than the 2010 numbers. How quickly that little curve reverted back. I find that interesting. And then a question. As I look at the outreach and online enrollment, I noticed that Sandpoint's kind of done a little bubble and is actually up the last couple of years, actually increased in 13 and 14. Of course, we've got the wet lab in there, and we can now get the full AA degree there. LCSC's come in as a partner there, and so that makes sense to me, and a lot of community support. So that's a positive, and that is sustaining itself, and we're getting there on that one. But what concerns me is both in the absolute numbers and in the percentages, the declines in the Bonners Ferry and Silver Valley outreaches. I mean, it's significant. I mean, in 2010, we were 159 in Bonners Ferry, 13 was 53, 14 were 64, so we've come back a little bit, but from being in the 150s, 130s, look, I mean, and Silver Valley also fairly dramatic to where we're under 100. At what point, well, and maybe there is no point, but I was going to say, at what point do those become unsustainable? You know, or do we just bite that bullet and say we're going to maintain that presence regardless of those numbers?
Yeah, I don't think we bite the bullet and say we're going to maintain a presence despite what happens. But as we go through this budget process, we have to look at that with a very critical eye. I know, for example, at CSI a number of years ago, they closed some outreach centers because the enrollment had taken a downturn. We haven't had that conversation yet, but we will look at it. And I don't know that I can give you an exact point of where we make the decision to withdraw or put more resources to try and recruit individuals in there. Those are very small communities, and they have very limited higher educational opportunities, although distance learning is becoming more and more prevalent, which is a less costly way to deliver that education. And so all I can say, Trustee Banducci, is that we will take a hard look at that. And you know, those centers are important to those communities, and it's not just a black and white dollar.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm sure there's no hard and fast formula for that. And again, we're supposed to have the presence in the 5 northern counties. We're basically mandated to do so. So, you know, I looked, the online enrollment has increased and tool, but so I was just kind of wondering what that evaluation process would look like, because that is a tough balance to meet our mission, if you will, but yet still be fiscally responsible.
Yeah, exactly.
Ron, did you have something?
Just to follow up to that discussion about touching these students while they're still in high school, Today, there was a job fair that took place in Post Falls, and I can't remember, Rael was there, and so I saw her there, but I think it was between 250 and 300 kids. What was interesting is they were all there practicing their skills of interviewing, and all of the companies sent down people to interview them, to practice. The kids all dressed appropriately for an interview, and we gave out 22 scholarships. And it was a tremendous opportunity for these kids that weren't sure what they were going to do. At that point, they're only 3 months away from graduating from high school, so if they don't have the money or they don't have the grade, chances are either they don't go to college or they choose to come here. So I think that NIC had a great presence there today, and I think that a lot of those students will come here, but I think there's a way that we could probably get in these schools with some marketing strategy that says we want to talk specifically to these kids that are saying, I'm going to college, all the way up until 3 months before graduation, and then they drop that dream because of finances or whatever, and have somebody develop that relationship with them there. And I think we can salvage most of these students that are going to go leave. And I believe the economy plays a big part of this, but it also plays a big part of it if they don't know what they're going to get and what return on that investment is going to be, and that's our job to do, is to educate them on that. So,
Any other comments? I have one maybe on that topic of marketing and trying to expand our enrollment. I know in the past we've talked about dual credit, and dual credit is growing, and that would be kind of a feeder to enrollment. Not all dual credit students complete the entire 2 years of college credit when they get out of high school, so I would imagine that that is becoming a larger and larger feeder into enrollment here at NIC after they complete high school. And also, we had talked in the past about the military and the fact that there are for-profit institutions out there that are not really serving veterans very well in terms of counseling and providing the kind of education they need in order to be truly educated for the workforce. And I was wondering if we were following up on any kind of marketing strategy, and we'll probably ask Curly to do that for us, to market NIC as an alternative to for-profits, given the advantages that that NIC provides. Can anybody talk about what we're doing to the military recruitment for veterans?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and President Dunlap, I would absolutely love to have Curly's done some outstanding work along with Keisha and our admission staff. So if you'll allow, I'd love to invite Curly back to present to that end quickly.
So, working with Keisha, we have actually made some tremendous outreach into the community. And one of the things that I'm preparing to do, and I actually surprised, great, and I'm ready for this, is we are actually sending forth some letters out into a variety of community leaders throughout the northern Idaho area. So there are a number of listservers that reach veterans in a lot of different ways that we want to communicate with, and we have a very simple checklist that if we can get it to a veteran, if they can scan it with their smartphone, if they get it in an email, it will take them not only directly to the NIC webpage, but directly to the veterans webpage, which gives a very simplified how to apply to NIC, and inclusive of why you shouldn't go to a for-profit school, because what they're promising you is a way to take your GI Bill money. What we're guaranteeing them is an education. So we didn't want to overwhelm everyone, and we didn't want to do it before we were ready to, get ready for the summer and the fall. But that is going to be my parting gift to the staff and faculty at NIC, is I'm going to get every vet in the area that I can to NIC.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Does that conclude your report then?
It does, Mr. Chair.
The next agenda item is the old business, and the first tab is the second reading for the revised committee policy 2.03.01 and 3.02.13, and Mark Browning is going to report on those.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would like to add another item under old business. I think we can do that since it's old business.
Depends on what your motion is.
I wasn't going to make a motion. I'm just going back to old business if I could. And I'd like to revisit our weapons policy in light of what's occurred. Sorry, Mark, but you could actually help us with that.
I don't get the family discount, so I can't help you out on that end. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and colleagues, as this is the second reading, as President Dunlap's mentioned a number of times throughout the past few months, staff has been working on going through each one of the policies and procedures. This is policy 2.0301, which is the policy on committees and how committees are structured, what are the definitions for those committees. You'll see in your materials that are there some minor wordsmithing changes and a definition for an ad hoc committee, and that the ad hoc is formed at the discretion of the president to be used in that basis for one-time events, task forces, steering committees, and there is a provision that if it remains active for more than 1 year, then it will be reviewed by the president and the appropriate administration folks to have consideration as a staff committee. So I'd be happy to stand for any other questions you might have on 20301.
Mark, if I may, one of the things that I noted is something I think is possibly missing. I referenced recently when we had the Athletic Event Center, for example. Now, when President Dunlap constituted that ad hoc committee, of which I was a part of, it was at the direction of the board, and then we provided not just direction to form it, but direction in how to form it in the sense of participants and the process and some of that. And then we have discussed with President Dunlap how, depending on what the committee may be that we ask him to form, that we may provide more or less direction, be very specific or not. I don't see anywhere in here where it provides that opportunity for the Board of Trustees to do that. It says it's at the discretion of the college president to form these ad hoc. So maybe that's an intentional omission or an accidental omission, but I kind of wanted to address that.
Sure. Mr. Chairman and Trustee Banducci, I think the thing to keep in mind with these policies are these are operational policies for all of the folks that operate below the line of your employee, the president. So this is what we operate under. You still have that full authority to direct your employee, the president, to say, just as you mentioned in the case of the athletic committee, President, we think it'd be a good idea for you to form this committee, and here's some parameters that we'd like you to do. He then, in turn, comes through this policy, 20301, and then establishes that. So I think the mechanism is there. It's just at which point the board is involved in the line and that operational line, where your employee operates above the line and all of us are below.
Okay, I was just curious because the board had been referenced regarding the standing committees, and so I wasn't sure. Okay.
I think on that, if I might follow up, Mr. Chair, those ad hoc committees, that, those are special circumstances which are under those, and I would think that under that procedure too, you're certainly going to have communication with your president that's going to say, we have an ad hoc committee that is addressing X issue, Y issue, and you're certainly in his reports, and you get a weekly report. He's certainly going to keep you up to date on it.
Any other questions or comments? Then, is there a motion to adopt the revised policy 2.03.01?
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Second?
Meyer, seconds.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Next one is,
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have policy 3.0213, which is, the subject is loyalty oath. The narrative, as you see, says no loyalty oath shall be required of any North Idaho College employee. In the review, we could not find historical data or any other contextual data that really gave any reason for this policy, and for that specific reason, we're recommending it be stricken from the record.
is there a motion to adopt revised, or to eliminate, actually, policy 3.02.13?
Meyer moves that.
Seconded.
Any discussion?
I think you answered the discussion, which is why do we have it in the first place?
Couldn't find out.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Thank you. The next old business is second reading of the credit hour policy, 4.02, and lead.
Chairman Howard, members of the board, President Dunlap. So we are bringing forth the credit hour policy, which we have proposed because the U.S. Department of Education has basically mandated the accrediting bodies, and for us it's Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, to require a credit hour policy and have specified some of the conditions of that policy. For us here at NIC, we believe that this policy will help to provide students a concise definition of what a credit hour is, and also provide some internal consistency in all matters related to the credit hour in reviewing the calculations of those credit hours. And then, of course, we will also meet the federal guidelines by having this policy adopted. This policy actually was developed from a committee led by Karen Ruppel and has been reviewed by a number of different folks on campus, the leadership team, President's Cabinet, Curriculum Council, Faculty Assembly. A number of entities have reviewed this. And the College Senate and the President's Cabinet recommend adoption of this policy. So I bring it forward to you, requesting that this policy be approved. Any questions?
Any questions? Judy?
Do you want a motion first?
Sure.
And discussion?
Should be fine.
I move we approve the adoption of policy 4.02.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Discussion was, this, as I read it and understand it, is one that's essentially following what the federal mandate is. Therefore, any student wanting to know about credit hour policy will find the same process in all institutions, all community colleges, and how they describe credit hour.
Yes,
Which I would hope would then be helpful to all students and what they can expect.
and well understood, yes.
Any other questions or comments? Lita, let me ask, this is a new policy. It's not replacing or superseding anything?
Correct.
Okay. Any further discussion or comments? We'll call for a vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes. Thank you. Next, we have a second reading of the live broadcast proposal for board meetings.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but you tell me no after I say it. So I would like to make a motion to suspend the second reading of the live broadcast of the board meeting under tab 3, and also suspend the first reading of the sabbatical leave request for FY 14 and 15 until we have a chance to review the president's budget. I don't think we're in a position to talk about either one of those right now, and I don't see the sense of urgency that we have to do these today. And so my motion would be to suspend these two, put them on later, but give us a chance to go through the budget, because these both have financial ramifications to our decisions, and I'm not sure we're in the middle, in a position to make that. So
This may seem a little bit laborious, but anticipating there may be some discussion or differences of opinion, let's take them one at a time.
okay, then let's. Thank you for the correction, Mr. Chair.
That's all right.
I would make a motion that we would suspend under tab 3 the second reading of the live broadcast of the board of meetings until that we have a chance to review the budget produced by the president.
Okay. And what I take it is it's a motion to table that until an indefinite time into the future.
Meyer seconds it.
Any discussion?
Discussion,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. Well, I think it would be helpful for us, when we bring this back, that there's been some possible funding sources identified. And, you know, we kind of just, off the top of our heads, might think we could find a funding source, but maybe going through that budget process is going to help us a lot. But it would be good. I know, I will say that Judy and I were the only ones on the board at the time that we managed to get the equipment we have now. I don't think you were here. You were here? Okay.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you for your vote of
I
support.
was a third vote.
Oh, thank you for that. Well, we had a couple of years before you were here.
been
where-
working on this
Where
a
we
while.
worked on it. And it was very important to us, and I think this is a worthy topic. Sometimes it takes time, getting it out there and trying to locate the funding. You don't always get the first run at it, but, so I do think it's a worthy topic, and I do look forward to having it coming back.
Okay. Any more discussion? Todd?
Yes. I guess along that note, to follow up on what Christie has said, that I would like to request that there be a look at this being included in the budget from, and maybe Mr. Finney needs to put that together, or Howard, so, because we definitely want to see how that fits in the budget, and again, we think we have some funds to do this, so I'd like to see that come out the other side when the sausage gets made.
Yeah. And just as a point of order, I think we have to approve it before they can put it in the budget. So we'll probably have to address it one way or the other, and then instruct the administration to put it in the budget or not put it in the budget.
And just for clarification, that was the purpose, was not to take it off our agenda, but to put this after we've had a chance. To suspend this doesn't mean to delete it. So I believe, Todd, we need to go through this. We need to look at the costs. We need to look at our options. $25,000 one-time setup fee during these times might not be appropriate now, and we address it down the road. So,
Any more discussion? Judy?
As I looked at the attachment for some of the costs for this topic, I didn't see any description of ongoing maintenance costs to factor into it. What I see here is a list of purchases needed to make it happen. Did I miss that, or can we add it as we look at the process?
I think that the proposal that came in from, that was done by Mr. Finney, we can ask that he augment that with any additional costs if there are any.
The financial impact statement says annual cost of 3 to 5. I wasn't sure if that was really maintenance or just operations of it.
Well, when we consider the motion, right now, we're just considering whether to table it or not. So,
Mr.
Well,
Chair,
if you'll do it
hey,
my way, then-
Ron, where did you see 25,000, partner?
that would, well, over a 5-year window, if it's going to cost $12,000 for the initial setup, and then $3,000 to $5,000 a year, just looking at a 5-year window. So that was where the 25 that got you.
Okay, I thought you were referring to that as a recurring annual cost, so I
No,
want
no,
to make sure I understood
annual
what you were
cost
saying.
is $3,000 to $5,000, it says.
the motion right now is, and the second is to table it, tab 3, for an indefinite time into the future. Any other discussion on that motion?
Yeah, I do have a question then. If we have to vote on it to get it inserted in the budget, but yet we're in the budget process and President Dunlap is soliciting those budget inputs to form the budget so that we can look at the budget as a whole, I'm kind of confused where I might jam that in there after the fact, after we get the first budget, and then I go back and say, okay, I think there's some spot in the budget where I can stick that in there, or I almost think that I'm almost behind the curve on that if that's, or we are, if that's an initiative that we want to move forward with.
Well, I would hope that
See
the
my confusion? I'm trying to, if you don't have it as one of the line items in the budget that's being put in, prepared by Mr. Finney from that department as part of their little pieces, these pieces are getting assembled.
Yeah, we can amend the budget, this board can, as we see it.
Is that how you're thinking about it? You know,
It can be handled at that time.
that's what I'm just asking for the, again, kind of the process.
Did you have-
No, I was just going to speak to that. Thank you.
Okay.
One of the reasons I commented about the fact that we need to pass on the motion to add it before we put it in the budget is, there may be just operative reasons why we want or don't want this. I mean, we haven't decided whether or not a live broadcast is in our best interest, and there may be other issues that reflect upon whether or not we do it or not that are apart from the budget. So the broader discussion still awaits us. Yeah. All right, so any more discussion? All in favor of tabling the live broadcast of board meetings for an indefinite time into the future?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Christie had asked that we amend the old business agenda to include weapons policy. In order to do that, you got to do it by a motion, it's got to be seconded, and the board has to agree to consider that as an agenda item right now.
You have too many rules,
For a
Mr.
reason.
Chair.
Mr. Chair,
Give a reason.
if I may, 672343-4C will allow an amendment to the agenda in the middle of a meeting. But one, you're right, you do have to have a motion. And two, you have to articulate a good faith reason why the item was not included
Yes.
in the original.
Okay, good faith reason.
Well, you need a second.
Okay, so I have, what do? Do I make the motion and I have to hope
Make
I
a
get
motion
second,
to,
and then I give my reason?
Make a motion to amend the budget to add, or amend the agenda to add into old business discussion of the weapons policy, or whatever you want, and then is being added at this time because.
Okay, I can do that. Thank you, Mark.
Welcome.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to, under old business, add in discussion on the weapons policy. Reason to add it now at this juncture in the agenda is in light of the governor signing off on the law that'll take effect July 1st. I don't feel like we have a lot of time to let this sit without us bringing a policy revision forward to have in place by August. And so that would be why I would think it's important to do some housekeeping now.
Meyer seconds it.
We have a motion and a second, and the motion is to amend the agenda to put the weapons policy on the agenda. It's been seconded. Any discussion? Go ahead, Jay.
The discussion would be, where are we with weapons policy now that we have new legislation in place? And at this point, we may not have an answer, but that surely needs to come up on the agenda.
And, yeah, do we have to vote before I can?
Yeah,
sorry.
understand that the nature of the motion right now is just, do we amend the agenda to include that? And then we can move on to, if there's another motion about what we do, or just a discussion on it. So, any discussion on whether we should amend the agenda? I guess I would make this comment if no other ones are made. It would seem to me that amending the agenda at this time is premature, quite frankly, because this is a complicated issue that we really need to have a lot of input on, I think, about what we do or how we amend the policy, and we need a lot more information, I think, rather than just discuss it in the abstract. And I can tell you that because we've had a lot of discussions with the other community colleges about the fact that there are concerns about how their policies are going to be amended and how they're going to be treated. And until we have more information, I think it would be difficult for us to give a meaningful discussion to weapons policy at this time. Having said that, if there are any more comments?
Well, yeah. No, go ahead, Dr. Dunlap.
Not with regard to the content of the policy, but with regard to where we are in the development of a policy. I think we can report out on that. And the community colleges of this state have gotten together and developed a list of questions that need to be clarified in terms of how we implement the policy, so that there is a level of standardization in terms of how we implement that. That list of questions was forwarded to the state board, and they also have additional questions that have been raised by the universities and are seeking a legal opinion on how we ought to answer those questions and implement. On the 2nd of April, the President's Council is meeting, and this is the #1 item on the agenda. And so Alex Harris has been, who is our point man for this, has been working with the other institutions as well. We have some thoughts on what maybe should or shouldn't be in the policy. It would be premature to discuss that now, but I assure you that we are working very hard to try and bring those components together. And I had asked Alex to be prepared to discuss this at our April meeting.
Christie, you had another comment.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so for me, it was merely a housekeeping item that I wanted to make sure we were moving forward as he has described. That was the only reason. I didn't want to discuss the nuts and bolts of what we're going to do, because you're right. There's so many unanswered questions, but I just wanted to make sure we were moving forward. It sounds like we are.
Are you comfortable enough with the fact that we're moving forward that you would withdraw your motion to amend?
I don't see what difference it makes. We're already doing what I asked for, but sure.
Well, are we still in discussion?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
still on the motion to amend.
Whether we're going to amend the agenda.
Well, I was going to say, Christie's right, we're already kind of okay. So all we're doing is, well, we've had a lot of comments that kind of extended beyond just the simple, are we amending the agenda? Because I actually would like to have at least a brief discussion, even if we're not in the nuts and bolts. So what we got to do now, take a vote on the agenda, on the amendment to the agenda?
Yeah, this is just on whether we amend the agenda
Otherwise,
or
then we're
not.
done with comment.
We haven't even
right?
got to the
Not-
substance
Not
yet.
what we're commenting on.
Judy?
Not going to the substance, my understanding is by having it under old business, and now if we agree to having it stay in old business, would it stay there or would it go to new business next month?
If we have something to present next month, it would go to new business.
So by having it on the agenda, I think our point is, or at least my point is, that it now be named as a topic that we're going to hear more about.
You are going to hear more about it. So, do you want to amend the agenda now? If there's any other discussion on amending the agenda? If you say no, that you're not going to amend the agenda, we move on to the next agenda. If you say yes, then we amend it, and you have to decide whether you're going to have a discussion on it or make a motion or something as to what to do, okay? So, all in favor of the motion to amend the agenda?
Aye.
Aye?
All opposed?
Well, hold on.
Well, no, don't oppose your own motion.
Well, she can
That's
do
bad
that.
form.
I'm pressured. I was just merely looking for a housekeeping item. I wasn't looking for discussion tonight. But if others want to discuss, although I will amend the agenda.
Any opposed?
Where are we?
At this point, my vote doesn't really matter.
Oh,
so,
feel like me, get
but
outvoted, it's okay.
I was just thinking that this was going so smooth, and we haven't attacked anybody, we haven't done anything, and now we've got guns coming into it. So I'm going to say no, only because I wasn't looking forward to going into that, but it's okay.
It's a 3-2 vote. I vote no. So, the agenda is amended to discuss weapons policy. What do you want to discuss?
A comment. One of the things that I heard in a shrill voice when we talked about this last time was about local control. Mark repeated it. The President repeated it. Several other people repeated it. So local control means to me that we make an independent process. We do it on the unique situation here at NIC and the unique culture in North Idaho, and it's a unique campus. Okay, already what I'm hearing, though, is we're back to that we're going to be standardized. We got to match the other two junior colleges. We got to listen to what the Board of Education says. We've got to align with the four-year institutions, and we're all going to have this unified policy. Now, at that point, you've just surrendered local control, and now you're just doing the same thing as everybody else around the state. And so I think that original argument, then, you've just contradicted yourself. So I think if we're going to have local control, we can always ferret a little bit of information from here and there and take ideas and suggestions, but to totally model what we're doing to be uniform or standardized with the other colleges, I think it undermines your very argument to why we couldn't have legislation passed at the state level because it took your control away. So I just want to, that's my comment. Let's bear that in mind. If we're going to truly have local control and be independent and have a unique policy, let's tailor it to the community here at NIC and the surrounding community.
If there are other comments on the general concept of weapons on campus, we can entertain those now. But there really should be a motion and a second so we know what we're talking about. But since we're just having a discussion and that's the way you wanted to start it, let's do that.
Okay. Again, Mr. Banducci and I disagreed on this topic a while ago, and nothing's changed there.
Well, no, wait a minute. You told me we're not so far apart.
Well, on some fundamentals we are. So I really, truly was looking for just making sure we were moving forward, we wouldn't get caught off guard, in August, when we need to have something in place. From what I understand, the legislation goes in effect, well, yeah, July. And we'll have summer school students. So I wanted to make sure we didn't get caught off guard, and I do understand that trying to get the legal definitions of what we're really bound to, there are quite a few questions. And Todd, I think that you talk about local control, I think the other colleges are going to face the same issues that we are. So it's not a bad idea to pool our resources and try to get some definitions.
I had no problem with that. As I said, you ferret out information, you share it.
Yeah.
Please don't interrupt, yeah.
So I think that's probably a good tactic to try to get some definitions that all of us are going to be bound by. And it's true that the governor moved forward and signed the legislation, but you do know that the majority of the board had hoped not to go that direction.
4-1.
So now we're in a position of what do we do to respond correctly. So that's all I was trying to do, was to make sure we were moving forward, and I'm satisfied that we are. And I guess we'll have those deeper discussions at a later
Judy?
time.
So then I'm thinking I just need to make a motion that this topic be on the agenda next month.
Yeah, do you, it may or may not be ready for next month.
I would like an update.
Alex, you be ready?
We'll be ready next month.
Will you?
All right.
Okay.
He's shaking
Well,
his
we're-
head.
Make
As
your
ready as
motion.
you can be at the time we do
Yeah.
it. So
I'll second her
I move
motion.
that we have the agenda on the topic this topic of weapons policy on our agenda next month.
Yeah, actually, you don't even have to make that motion. If one trustee makes the request, it goes on the agenda.
I just got to write down the rules,
We
Ken.
thought we'd make it real clear this
Let's not
time.
get back to that. I got my, no.
Okay, now moving on.
Hold on, Ken.
Oh, you gotta wait in.
Contrary to my vote, everybody had discussion, so I'm jumping in here.
Okay.
This is a very, very sensitive subject, especially in light of what just happened this last week, and so it's pretty serious. I've gone on record, I support the Second Amendment. I've gone on record saying I support local control, but as a trustee for this college, the first thing we got to look out are for the health and safety of our students. There are some things that are unique to NIC that maybe aren't the same as every other college, where we have a police force within a 2 or 3 minute response time, and that there's some of the colleges that we've talked to that would not support arming their security team. And I think that that's one of the things that we would probably come to, just guessing on the discussions we have, we'd come to a consensus that we should have armed security officers on campus there. So I think that as we proceed forward with this, that we all look at this thing and saying that it isn't all or none. I think that we can come to some consensus that looks out in the best interest of our students and brings that decision to here, take it to the college, see if we can't get a consensus, and then we can stand united in front of the legislature saying that we believe that arming all of our students is not probably the best thing to do. So now I've said my piece, and that's why I voted no, because I want to talk.
Any other comments?
Well, I was going to say to Ron, the good part of that is to get the enhanced concealed permit, there's quite a bit of expense involved, so most of the college students are poor and probably can't afford it. So I don't think they'll all be armed.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, now, moving on. New business. Head Start grant. Beth Ann Fuller.
Chairman Howard, Board of Trustees, and President Dunlap, thank you for allowing me to come and present our North Idaho College Head Start 2012-2013 annual report, along with our program year 2014-2015 continuation grant application. The mission of our North Idaho College Head Start is that we're a school readiness program that provides education and support for young children and their families. This goes along with the mission of the college, and we provide comprehensive services to all enrolled children and their families, which includes things such as health and nutrition, social services, and other services that are determined by family needs assessments. One very important piece is that Head Start services are designed to be responsive to each child and their family's ethnic, cultural, and linguistic heritage. Head Start emphasizes the role of parents as their child's first and very most important teacher. I'd just like to highlight our child development assessments. We do screeners and assessments on our children. We do 3 specific assessments. We do one in the fall, one in the winter, and then one in the spring. And according to our percentage of children meeting the expectations of their major areas of child development, we did very well in terms of having growth in all areas. We had growth in social, emotional, gross and fine motor, language, cognitive, literacy, and math skills. So we're very proud of that. If you don't mind, I'd like to pepper in a few statistics for this year as well. Within that group of children, we have 16% of children in the 2012-2013 school year that had identified disabilities. This year, we're up to about 19.5. I'm not sure how we got a 0.5 there, because I don't know how you can have a half of a child, but we also know that we'll be up over 20% children with disabilities being served by our program this 13-14 school year. I think that's in part by some of our inclusion programs that we have. We have one specific inclusion program with the Coeur d'Alene School District, where we're able to serve both the Coeur d'Alene School District Developmental Preschool and the North Idaho College Head Start together, and also Lake Pend Oreille School District as well. We also combine their developmental preschool and our Head Start program to serve children in an inclusion setting. As far as our program statistics, we last year had 14% of children that were enrolled in Head Start that were homeless. We are up to 19% this year. So our criteria for choosing the families that can benefit the most from our program is working very well, because we are able to serve those families that can benefit the most. 13% of the children last year were enrolled in Head Start, and they were foster children. And we have about 14% this year, so we've seen a 1% growth in that population. In that population, that includes foster children that are in the foster system, but also foster children that are categorically foster based on being in a kin care or a relative or non-kin care other than their actual custodial parent. And in terms of services to families, we provided services to our families that included 329 of our families that we served last year received at least one of the services that were listed in the types of services that we provide, which is either direct or referrals, notably emergency and crisis intervention. That would be food, clothing, and shelter, immediate needs. We were able to resource families in that area to the effect of 95 families that were able to get resources such as that from us and from other agencies, of course. And so in terms of the highlights there, we try to make sure that all of our children are up to date on all appropriate preventive and primary health care, and also the children receiving dental and immunizations. So we did very well, but we want to improve upon that, especially this year. We've already seen an improvement in the percentage of children that are actually getting all of their preventive care according to EPSDT, which I think stands for Early Periodic Screening, Detection, and Treatment. I may be wrong. And so when children get their well child, we also track to make sure that they've gotten all of those preventive measures that they should have. One specific might be lead screening. Lead screening is usually done at 12 months and then at 2 years as well. And we're finding that a large percentage of our children have not received a lead screening during that time period. It is now pretty much mandatory, but the children that we're serving now are kind of coming up into the next year. It should be a lot better, because I think they're doing lead screening more routinely. So especially for our children in Shoshone, we try to work on making sure that they especially get lead screened. In terms of our budget, I'd like to say that we definitely had a balanced budget at the end of the year, which is always important. And in the
last 39 years, we have never gone over budget, so that's something important to talk about. At the bottom of our actual expenses versus budget expenses for the 2012-2013, I'd just like to note that our Head Start families and community volunteers generated over $631,828, representing 107% of the required amount of goods and services that we need to make sure that we bring into the Head Start program. That's our in-kind match. Our in-kind match is based on 25% of our total budget. Do you have any questions about our annual report?
Any questions, Ron?
Just for, first of all, Beth, it's incredible when you look at these trends from disability, homeless, and fosters. That's a 10% growth in that, and so you wonder what's going on that we have that happening here. So, but for clarification, all of this is federal funded dollars, right? And we administer for that.
Right.
The question I had is, you talked about lead screening. Is that per paint? What is lead screening? I've never heard that.
Sure. Lead screening in terms of, it could be paint. It could also be a family that may actually be exposed to lead for some other reason. Usually it's a home that's been built before 1974, when it was pretty routine that there would be lead paint. It can also be exposure depending on if the family has a hobby, such as like making bullets or something like that. We don't see a lot of that, but we do have families that of course are trying to find homes, and they'll find any kind of home that they possibly can. And sometimes that does include a substandard housing or very old housing. So that, like you said, the paint would be one of the major sources.
So a follow-up to that. So how many children have you tested under this lead screening? How many have had a positive on there?
Yeah.
I mean, do you have the statistics
We
on
do,
that?
and we have only had at the most, we've had one child each year that has needed to be continued to be followed. And one year we had 3. That's been the highest number of children, but the effects of lead are so severe if they're in high levels. It continues throughout a period of time to affect their cognitive skills, and so it's not easy to remediate it either. So it's a real long process if you do find a child that's above the appropriate lead levels. 0 would be appropriate, but.
Judy?
As we talk about finances, as a federal grant, then there are no costs to the college. As I recall, because there's some administration we do, is there any funding to the college for doing that administration?
Yes, it's in the budget.
Sure. And I think it's important that we as a board understand that, and that the community understand it, that there is no cost to the college in the sense of either providing programs or even administering them.
And if it is all right with you, when we move on to the actual grant application, I can definitely go through that budget line items and tell you what specific pieces of that go for the services that the college provides.
Let me just wait and see if there are any more further questions on
Okay.
your report first.
Well, just real quick. Well, Beth, I've always been a big fan, and you've had me there at your facility to do some personal safety training for your staff, and I'm in awe of your staff, because not every family is in an urban setting, and so your staff goes out, way out in the woods sometimes, all by themselves, and tries to serve families that are isolated, and I just find that incredible. So when you look at some of these numbers, you've served 277 children, and then you look at the Coeur d'Alene School District has identified 330 students this year. Next year projected at 350 that are homeless. And then the numbers of immunizations, 328 children up to date on immunizations. Well, all those numbers means that there's just still not, you're doing everything you can, but we're still not reaching all of them. But I think it's incredible what your staff does, and I want to compliment you, and I've always been pleased that you are associated with North Idaho College.
Todd?
One quick question, not to dispute what you just said, but help me understand it. Under the Children's Center we have here on the campus, we have a couple of classroom teachers. And if I'm looking at this correctly, you guys have made a note that Children's Center staff wages are not funded by Head Start. What sort of financial impact does that have on NIC to provide those two classroom teachers?
Great question. What the reciprocity, the agreement that we have is that we pay for what is actually the equivalent of the slot that those children would be in. So the benefit to an NIC student or a staff person that might be a foster parent or such as we have is that we actually essentially pay the tuition. We are actually paying for a slot, not a tuition. So what we're paying is the equivalent of what those families would pay. And so that they get provided the same services through the Children's Center. The Children's Center is NIAC accredited. They are an amazing program, and they meet the guidelines that the program, our Head Start program, also has to abide by already before even partnering with us. So it was an excellent partnership, and essentially we're able to make sure that families that may not be able to use the Children's Center, might have been on the waiting list or not gotten into the Children's Center, or not been able to afford the actual tuition it would have cost to be in that slot. So that covers what cost that, and then they provide the same exact services that they provide to all the children that pay for services at the Children's Center.
Okay, so basically you're paying a equivalent tuition for a child, so that helps offset some of the salary we're paying that classroom teacher.
The classroom teachers that are serving those children, yes.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
All right, you want it? Yes, Judy.
I was looking, about question and comment, I was ready to make a motion.
Well, she wants to report
Oh,
yet
I'm
on
sorry.
the grant.
I'm so excited to approve it, I'll wait.
So in terms of funding, federal funding for all of our Idaho Head Start and Early Head Start programs comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and then it goes to the Office of Head Start, and then to local grantees. And those local grantees are community agencies, nonprofits, colleges, school districts, or migrant and seasonal or tribal programs. So we have 13 Head Start programs in Idaho, and we're one of those. So that is a bit of the answer to that. Families must, as a rule, usually have an income at or below poverty level, and at least 10% of our program's enrollment needs to be made available to children with disabilities. So those are some of the major areas that, the primary reason that someone would qualify for Head Start. Our continuation grant application included a community assessment, which we do every year, and we look at all the statistics, the data that we can gather from all 5 northern counties in terms of population increases or decreases, unemployment, homelessness, early care and education, and many other additional considerations such as the child abuse and neglect and the foster care system impacts. And we've done that community assessment, and we've also done a self-assessment, which means that we look at our program strenuously and make sure that we're meeting all of the criteria that we need to follow to receive this funding. We have determined that we would like to continue to serve in all 5 northern counties. We are seeing that we're needed in all 5 counties and all of the areas that we currently serve. I can't think of an area that would not need our services. Our highest issues right now is that we have really high waiting lists in Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls and Lakeland. So in Kootenai County, we're seeing that we can't serve the number of children by about 2/3 and 1/3 of what are on that list. We also did a parent survey and did a summary from that. Our parents, for the most part, feel like we're doing an excellent job, and that was wonderful to see. They have also mentioned that a couple areas that they would love to see a Head Start program should there ever be any opportunity to serve in other areas. We hear each year probably Spirit Lake, Athol, sometimes we hear Priest River, and we always hear Hayden. So those are some of the areas that they brought up in terms of places that we could be serving.
Beth Ann, I take it you require the board's approval of this grant application? And that needs to be done by a motion from the board?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
No?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, I move that our board approve the Head Start request for federal funding from the Department of Health and let's see, is that the right wording? We approve the Head Start request for grant? Is that the right wording?
Grant application?
That's your motion?
Yes.
Second? Do we have a second?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I second.
Seconded. Any discussion?
Just a couple of comments. As a community college, it's an interesting phenomenon that you're dealing with the folks that we hope to have come visit us. And your description is it's really the children between the ages of 3 and 5, so it's before they get into the public school system. You've also highlighted that one of your roles is to emphasize the role of parents. And I just think that's an exciting and proper place for us to be, and I'm proud to be part of a board that oversees and champions your grant.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and your application is approved. Thank you very much. Thanks for the report. We had a prior motion on the sabbatical leave. Ron, did you want to make that motion?
I'll restate the motion. I would make a motion to suspend the first reading of the sabbatical leave request for year 14-15 until we've had a chance to review the president's budgets and theirs.
So your motion is to table the sabbatical leave requests until we have an opportunity to review the budget. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And a second?
Meyer seconds it.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I think that is a smart thing to do. We've talked about process and going through the budget and making sure we could afford this. But I'd also like to say that this board has been very supportive of professional development, and I know that we'll try to do everything we can to continue to support professional development. But the right thing to do is to look at the budget first. And so this is just coming before us a little sooner than we'd like. I think if it comes back in the budget process, it will be better for consideration.
Judy?
A question for the administration. Does this have any implications in people's planning if we delay it?
Chairman Howard, Trustee Meyer, the simple answer would be, yes, it has an impact. Is it impact that is insurmountable? The answer is no. We will continue to plan that. The division chairs will have to plan for the absence of faculty should they receive sabbatical. We have time for that.
Thank you. Judy?
And thank you. I think we want to be conscious of that as a board, as well as trying to meet the criteria of blending it into the big picture. And I think as you've gathered, our board is clearly supportive of professional training. Heck, we all went to Seattle to do that, so we ought to be sure the same thing is available to our campus folk. How we can figure out how to fit it in is, I think, what we look forward to doing next month in order to make that planning still work for you.
Any other comments or questions? So we vote on the motion to table the sabbatical leave requests until we have more information on the budget. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Lita, you're up again. First reading, revised faculty employment policy 3.02.08 and transfer of credit policy number 5.04.06.01.
Trustee Howard, members of the board, President Dunlap, I'm bringing before you the review of the faculty employment policy as a part of the process that we've been going through this year and reviewing and in some cases revising policies just to make sure that they're up to date and that we can use them purposefully. The faculty employment policy, as I am presenting it this evening, has only been modified very slightly, and it was more just a change in language to make it a more readable policy. There has been no substantive changes to this policy. Any questions on the faculty employment policy?
Any questions on 3.0, 2.08?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Christie.
Since there's no substantive changes, I see no reason to bring this back for a second reading. I'd like to make a motion to approve it under first reading. That's my motion.
Need a second?
I'll second that.
All right. So there's a motion to approve 3.02, 3.08, and waive the necessity for a second reading. Any discussion on that?
Back again to the administration, any reason that this doesn't help make things move along? Any wrinkles to leaving it, to delaying it? Any reason not to vote for it today?
Any other discussion, comments? All right. Let's have a vote on the motion to approve 3.0, 2.08 on the first reading and waive the second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye, passes. The next one is 5.04, 6.01.
Thank you. During the recent visit of the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities, one of the recommendations they provided for us was that we consider evaluating the policy that we had in place related to transfer. They felt like that policy was not complete enough in that it did not necessarily address how we receive transfers into the institution. And so following up to that recommendation, the following policy is being presented to comply with the recommendation, and also, probably more importantly, to make sure that we are providing our students with a clear understanding of how transfer credits are received at North Idaho College. This policy, as we have developed the process for reviewing policies, has really gone through a number of different groups to review it. Tammy Haft, our Director of Admissions and Registrar's Office, has also worked with the other registrars across the state to really be looking at consistency in the acceptance of transfer of credit policies that are being developed by many institutions in the state. In addition to that, Karen Ruppel and the Faculty Assembly and the Senate, a number of folks have reviewed this policy. So I would tell you that the College Senate and the President's Cabinet have reviewed this and are presenting to the board to be endorsed. This is a first reading, so we are not necessarily asking for action this evening, but presenting it as a first reading.
Any questions?
One quick one. I take it this is a fairly standard procedure policy for the acceptance of credit, consistent with other educational institutions.
Chairman Howard, Trustee Banducci, you are correct. It is very, very standard, basically saying that we will accept credit from institutions that are accredited by a regional accrediting body.
Any other questions? Judy?
Question on the procedure part, which was included with policy. Is this an okay time to ask that question?
We're just actually approving the policy now. I didn't even know if the procedure's been presented to us yet. And it won't be, probably. It's something that the procedure is put together by the administration based upon our policy.
And I was thinking that in the same vein, and so it was more an information item than a judgment item, since it's really not in our domain.
Sure. Did you have a
With
comment?
that proviso, may I ask my question? Which is, on the procedure on the item number 8, the procedure says that upper division courses are not accepted unless there's a specific equivalent lower division course at North Idaho College. And my question was, why wouldn't we accept upper division classes? And you're saying it's because you have to have a specific equivalent in the lower division level?
Chairman Howard, Trustee Meyer, yes, you are correct. The other point of not accepting those is they would not be necessarily applicable to a program of study at North Idaho College, because we would not include upper division courses in our programs of study as a two-year institution.
One other question on item 9, then, nope, item 10. Transfer grades and credits are not computed within the cumulative GPA earned at North Idaho College. And there again, that would be things that a student has brought with them as credentials and credits from other places. Don't get included then in their work here at North Idaho College GPA? And it sounds like that's the case, therefore why not?
Lita?
Trustee Howard and Chairman Howard, Trustee Meyer. Typically, your grade point average at your institution is earned by the credits, based on the credits earned at the institution. So you don't, your cumulative grade point average is not a cumulative of every educational experience you've ever had. It's institution by institution.
Any other comments, Ron?
I'm 61, and in 2008, 61 was retired and a senior, and for some reason, when I get to 61, now it's not 60 years old anymore, it's 65. So I noticed that you are one of the few that didn't discriminate us that are on that cross line. Is that been looked at as saying that for, when you talk about a discounted rate for seniors, was that addressed at all?
Chairman Howard, Trustee Nielsen, to be honest with you, I don't have a response to that. I don't think that we've intentionally discriminated against specific age groups, and I'm not really even certain of how we arrived at 65.
No, it's at 60.
Oh,
I'm saying
sorry.
that every place you go now, any of the senior discounts, about the time I got to be 60, they moved them up to 65. So I'm suggesting here is they kept us at 60. So did we consider any financial ramifications of doing what everybody else does, which is to push that retirement age or senior citizen age up to what would be acceptable number?
Lita?
My guess is the folks that were sitting around the table looked around at each other and said, let's make this closer to our own age. No.
Good on them, then.
In jest, of course. I don't know that we've considered that. Certainly, I think that we could potentially consider that as we were looking at the procedure.
Any other questions or comments? I have a question for you. Not knowing what these different associations do approve, just generically, does this policy affect career technical education credits? Or they lay outside this policy?
Chairman Howard, I would tell you that most of the career technical institutions are accredited by one of these bodies. And so it does have no negative impact. The policy would not have any negative impact on the career and technical students.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? So, do we have a motion? Judy?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I move that we, let's see, this is first reading,
Yes.
but we could move to accept it this time around.
Yes.
And I move that we do that for policy, transfer of credit policy number 5.04.06.01.
And waive the second reading? In a second. Do we have a second for that?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Go ahead.
Again, the same question to administration. Any reason why this makes any wrinkles for anybody?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So 3.04.06.01 is adopted as our policy. Thank you, Lita. And Graydon Stanley has first reading on revised policy 6.01, employees' use of facilities and equipment, and revised admissions policy 5.01.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, President Dunlap, and other guests tonight, again, going through the same policy or same process that you've heard a lot about. There are two policies that I'm here to represent as part of a first reading tonight. They have gone through all the appropriate processes on campus and now are coming in front of you. First one I'd like to talk to you about is policy 6.01 relative to facilities and equipment. You may note that there are considerable changes, but I believe it's just kind of going from glass half empty to maybe glass half full. The policy originally talked about personal use of college equipment by employees is not allowed, and it's been changed a bit to be the personal use of college equipment by employees is allowed only in the following circumstances, and then it enumerates those. I would note on number one, just for your information, that refers primarily to outdoor pursuits of equipment. That's rental equipment that is available to students, faculty, staff, and the public for rental rates, and there are different rates according to what constituency you represent. Item number two refers primarily to technical equipment, often that's cell phones, that's iPads, that's laptops that employees use in performing their work. And finally, number three refers to equipment, often instructional in nature, that might be new, that employees need to learn how to operate that equipment in order to be able to use it in the instruction in their work as well. We get some new technology or new equipment, and to be prepared to use that with our students and in our job. Oftentimes we need to practice that before we're on the job. So those are the major changes that were made to that policy. I'd be glad to try to address any questions to that end.
Any questions on 6.02, 6.01?
I do, yes. Graydon, in paragraph number 2, fourth sentence says, will be primarily used for college business, but incidental and occasional personal use is allowable when such use is not in violation of other pertinent NIC policies, i.e. policies on computer use and electronic mail, and does not interfere with college business. I guess my question is kind of twofold. One is, how do we define incidental and occasional? Because that could be subject to some interpretation there, or individual judgment. And then I guess the second thing is, as we talk about it not in violation of the other pertinent NIC policies, are we going to put any sort of caveats on that that says, okay, not during the academic day, so if you're at 6 a.m. or you're at 5 p.m., maybe the rules are a little different, and that's where you have that incidental and occasional use versus the actual contact time of instruction and that sort of thing, when you really shouldn't be doing personal things anyway.
Mr. Chairman, Trustee Banducci, I think my best response to that at this point would have to do more with the content of how it's being used. I think about the example of my iPad or my cell phone that are college property, and oftentimes I might receive a phone call or I might receive an email that would come in on that wouldn't be directly related to college business at the time. I don't do that as a habit, but that could occasionally occur. Somebody has my cell phone number and calls. In terms of content and that reference to NIC policy, I think the use of, so when we're using that equipment to send email from, that it falls within our computer use policy about the content that you access or you send out through the use of that technology. I think, so the focus would be on content, not time of day.
Okay. I mean, my concern is just to reduce the level of ambiguity so that, we don't end up in a...
Any other comments or questions on policy 6.01? We have a motion on 6.01. It's a first reading.
Yeah, if everyone,
Still make a motion if you want to.
sure, if there's a comfort level, I'm fine with it. I'll make a motion to waive the first reading, or second reading, and approve it on the first reading.
Meyer seconds the motion.
Any discussion on that?
I guess the same question that Christie has asked. Judy, is there any bear traps on this that we're missing, or anything that, based on current policy, that where we're setting ourselves up? And that's where I go back to, have we reduced the ambiguity enough that we're not going to get in a, well, maybe that applies, maybe it doesn't, and, it's not as enforceable a policy as maybe it should be? Or
Thank you.
Comment after you.
Mr. Chairman and Trustee Banducci, we still have the ability through the use of this equipment to monitor its appropriate use. The email account, the phone calls, we retain those records because it's a part of our property, so we can always go ahead and monitor that and check that on occasion. Additionally, in paragraph 3, you note about having a checkout form and permission of the president's cabinet members. So there's a process in place that allows us to review that at all levels, including the president reviewing our use as well. So I'm certainly comfortable with that. In fact, I think this is a more responsible policy than what we had before.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't have any issues with this. I am a public employee, and I'm on call a lot, and there are times when as expected, I might have a personal call that comes in because I'm not home when I want to be. And so, but we, too, at the city, have other policies that cover content. And so I feel comfortable with this. I don't think there's a bear trap, Todd.
Any other comments? All right, so there's a motion to pass revised policy 6.01 and waive the second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have adopted and passed revised policy 6.01. Could you talk to us about 5.01, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, President Dunlap, the next policy, 5.01, has to do with students and admissions in particular. And I should tell you that much of that is driven by U.S. Department of Education policy. Some of you might be familiar with terminology that used to be in place relative to ability to benefit. It has evolved in several different directions. At one time, ability to benefit was defined by the student's ability to come here and take a placement test and show that they could be successful in classes. Most recently, it has been defined in just this past year about being a high school graduate or GED recipient. So you'll see in that section A, where it talks about that we must have an official transcript, high school transcript, or homeschool transcript showing the date of graduation, or GED. That's what proves that ability to benefit, that in fact they're ready to come to college and have the opportunity to be successful here. That's basically the major change that occurs in this policy. Most of the rest of it is just a cleanup in language. I would note that I suspect we'll be in front of you again in a year or two, because the discussion taking place at the federal level is to move back again, to start looking again at ability to benefit measured potentially by a placement test. So right now the policy is, we're suggesting it be changed to be in compliance with U.S. Department of Education policy. That's the GED, the high school transcript. We may be back in front of you to comply with a change in policy in a couple of years. We're hearing that.
Any questions?
I have a question, I have a comment. So you're going to change that age for senior citizens to 62 to make Mr. Nielsen not feel so old?
You know, I should tell you, in fact, that was a movement of the Student Services Division to change that, to keep that policy at 60, in fact, to accommodate Trustee Nielsen.
Nice bow tie.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ron?
I've read this twice, and I struggle with this, that how this ever got in here. We're talking about international students, where it says, therefore, the college reserves the right to limit the number of students admitted from any one foreign country to allow for a diversified student body. It's almost like you read it once and you say, how's that? I see you struck that. It looks like you should have put a bigger pin on there. So
Absolutely agree. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
I would make the motion that we suspend the second reading, approve as presented by Mr. Stanley and Policy 5001.
I'll second that.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Policy 5.01 is adopted by the board.
Thank you, trustees.
Thank you. Yes,
We got a lot
I
of
get
work.
the next one.
Lightens the load next time.
As I have indicated to all of you on several occasions, the Community College Trustee chairs and presidents meet approximately 4 times a year to try and discuss common issues and common problems. Some of those are issues that we take to the legislature or respond to issues that are before the legislature. It's worked out as a very well-accepted means of giving to the legislature our joint feeling on things as much as budget and other things. When we put the group together, we thought it would be best if we developed a mission statement as well as the values that we are pursuing with this organization, and that's presented to you as tab 8. And what I would like to do, each of the colleges is providing this to their trustees for review, comment, and/or acceptance. And so I open the discussion for you if you'd like to adopt it at this time, or on a first reading, or you have comments about changes in it. Judy.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the ICCC mission statement and values as presented on March 26th.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Ron?
Just for clarification, where we adopt this, that there's going to be some times where it says the community college trustees of Idaho will, and then there might be a policy where we're in conflict. So I'd like to understand where that, we just talked about, we had a pretty heated discussion in Boise about the difference between our gun laws on there. So if this would become a universal, then we would not have, the way I read this, we wouldn't have the ability to have a separate policy. So I just make, for clarification, that we are not going to surrender to differences of opinion to the 2 other southern colleges on maybe a policy where we want to arm our security officers here, and that's against their policy.
Yes. Actually, your comments were part of a discussion and fundamental and agreement, complete agreement, quite frankly, amongst all of the participants. Hence, on the first value, continually strive for a common community college voice while preserving local autonomy, exactly for that reason. So that make sure that what we were trying to do was cooperate, but we are not surrendering our decision-making process to this group in any way.
Follow-up to that, I mean, clearly that the 2 or 3 times that we've been in the presence of the other colleges, there's been a great share of information, and that we know that the one thing that you do is when you're trying to keep people from having money is divide them and conquer them. But if we stand united with the finance, the JFAC people down in Boise, we can make some tremendous strides in getting back some of this funding that's been taken away from the community colleges, especially for facilities and things like that. So I think this is a great relationship that we started, and I would do everything I can to encourage it.
Christie.
Mr. Chair, I really support the values that the group has highlighted. I'd like you to read the values because I think they're important, and certainly support, just as Ron said, I support the work of the other colleges and all the successes we've had in coming together to share common issues.
I'm going to sound like a naysayer here, but I don't mean to be at all. I fully endorse what we're doing here. I guess my question is, being a guy that's been in military for far too long and other governmental entities, we seem to have a lot of meetings and we produce a lot of mission statements and da-da-da-da. We're doing all these things already, so is this just really to codify it, to say we put it on paper and we just agree to these? I just hope we're not expending unnecessary time and effort or killing any extra trees just to say what we're already doing. Is there an actual purpose to putting it on paper, really, so we can show we did it, I guess? I just don't want us to see us spending unnecessary time to, I don't know.
Yeah, and your concern is well placed, quite frankly, because it would be easy to do that. I think the idea of the people who have met here is that we're doing this for historical purposes. As the personnel change on here, and we hope that we know that they will change, that there's a sort of a target that everybody can look back at. Sure. And we try to make it as brief and as pointed as possible. So the idea of this was to provide a historical outline of what the purposes of this group were. Any other questions? All right, we have a motion to approve the Idaho Community College Consortium mission statement and values. And I don't think that was, this is on a first reading, so I don't think that motion was to waive the second reading. It was just, I don't remember the motion.
Actually, it was, wasn't it?
It was intended that because I said to approve it, but I'll reword it to make it be.
No, that's, just so we know what we're voting on, that's all. So the motion is then to approve the Idaho Community College Consortium mission statement and values and to waive second reading.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Any other discussion?
Second, I guess.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Judy and Ken, right on that.
The next item on the agenda is the legislative update. Mark Browning.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we'll make this as brief as possible. As you know, last Thursday, the second regular session of the 62nd Idaho Legislature adjourned sine die. The bills of note, the Community College Appropriation, Senate 1415 and Senate 1416, which is a PTE or CTE appropriation, were passed out by near unanimous votes. They have yet to be signed into law. They are sitting on the governor's desk. There is some note in the Community College Appropriation. The line item for efforts at the Sandpoint Center for $302,000 was fully recommended and funded as part of that appropriation bill. However, there was an EWA clawback, as the President alluded to in his report earlier, EWA being enrollment workload adjustment, which is that formula that was originally passed in 2007 to help with the growth of colleges. We got a little bit of money for that in fiscal 13 and fiscal 14. They took that back for fiscal 15, so the net increase in the community college appropriation to NIC is $20-ish thousand. It's less than $30,000. When you hear and read news reports, and you'll hear as primary campaigns unfold in the next 6 to 8 weeks, that education was treated very, very well. There was a 9% increase in the community colleges. Just know that there was not 9% that came here to NIC, but part of that is it's the first clawback they've ever done in legislative history. So I guess we're part of history. There is an overall increase in the career and technical appropriation. There's a line item in there for $53,500 for a lathe, some shears, shear blades, and alignment rack. There's also some money in there for advanced manufacturing. A couple of other bills I want to make mention to you. House 036 streamlines the process through which we receive the out-of-district tuition payments. As it currently stands, that figure is formulated. The state board collects that data. They send that number to the liquor division. They then send that number to the controller's office. Controller's office cuts a check and it sends back. This will cut the liquor division out of that, and the state board office will send that request directly to the liquor division, so it streamlines that. It doesn't change the amount, the rate, how much we get. We've talked at length about how we're doing with that. The last one I want to mention is Senate 1229, which is known as the 8 and 6 bill. It provides some scholarship money for high school juniors and seniors, $200 for a high school junior, $400 for a high school senior for dual credit. We'll have to have some discussions on campus on how we handle that, because currently our practice of billing the student first and then the student getting reimbursed for the out-of-district tuition at $50 per credit could put a high school student outside of Kootenai County in an untenable position of having to, taking most of their funds to pay that out of district first. They would be operating under the assumption that if they took a 3-credit class as a junior and it's $65 a credit, that they'd have most of that money paid for, and they wouldn't have nearly enough. They'd have a $150 bill that would come right off the top for their out of county, so it would be added to that. So Currently, other two community colleges are having discussions with us. We're looking at their process, they're looking at ours. We're trying to figure out which way is the best way to go, and if we change it overall, if we just change it for dual credit students. But those are some things that we'll have to look at going forward. So we did touch on 1254, the weapons policy. There's one final one. I want to check the time when we want to make sure we get out here this evening. Senate concurrent resolution. True of the record, Mr. Chairman, Alex Harris says 8:37, so we got to go about another minute.
Sorry,
Senate
Alex.
concurrent resolution, which is 139, which was the study to look at the funding formula primarily for career and technical education, passed unanimously on the Senate side. It died on the House side. Got through committee, got to the floor, and then was pulled off the floor by unanimous consent the last day. It was part of a bargaining chip. So
Why? Just a bargaining chip?
I think that's unfortunate. So that's the report. It was 74 days in length. It's the shortest session since 2004. And here at NIC, we will host, we will be the location for a legislative forum that will be May 1st. It's being hosted by the joint chambers of Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene Public Policy Committees. And I'll be doing some moderating with that, but that'll be the 1st of May at 6 o'clock, I believe.
Any questions for Mark? Legislative report?
Just a
Okay,
comment, Mr. Chair. Well, maybe one question. Mark, comment. Mark, you spent an awful lot of time in Boise, and you've proven to this board that your role as a vice president in communications is just exactly what we need when you go down and represent us. We haven't had to hire a lobbyist. You're well-known, you're well-respected, and you get our message across very well. So I want to thank you for all the nights you spent in Boise, away from your family, and everything that you did for us this legislative session. Thank you.
I appreciate that, but I would not be truthful if I didn't say it's not all me. It's a team that really works, and it's a lot of folks that never step foot in the Capitol building that help put those materials together. They're there to answer questions, and they're there to answer frantic texts, during committee. It says, what about this? What do I tell them? And so it's really a lot of folks, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other comments or questions? Mark, thank you very much for your report. The next is the board chair's report. I would like to report that we did have a meeting with the other community college trustees, chairs, and presidents, and we went over a number of items. Top of the list was guns on campus. There are a number of concerns that different community colleges have, and they vary. One of the questions, for instance, from CWI, which has no buildings that they own and occupy. They rent all their buildings. And so there's a question about whether or not if their landlords have restrictions with regard to guns in their buildings, how that's going to impact their leases and how that's going to impact their ability to occupy. So you can see there's a wide breadth of issues that are coming up that need to be discussed and considered and try to find some kinds of solutions to it. There was a discussion, if you will recall, this particular bill says it's going to preempt the field of concealed weapons and guns at universities and educational institutions. What it does specifically is to grant permission to carry to two different classes, enhanced carry and retired officers. Our policy on this campus has been no guns on campus. That means open carry. That means the non-enhanced concealed weapons carry. And so our policy, as we start to talk about it, not just here but across the state, not just in community colleges but in regular four-year universities where this all applies, is to what extent can we continue our prohibitions about open carry and concealed weapons carry? And to what extent can we define what we mean by having these guns on campus? Can they be displayed at any time? If they are displayed, what are the consequences of that? So you can see that there's a lot of very technical issues, some of which are going to involve legal questions, but some of which are going to involve policy also. So there's a lot of discussion that's going to have to go into where do we come down as an institution, given the restrictions presented by this new law. We also went over the mission statement at this last meeting that you've just heard us review. There was a big discussion on out-of-county tuition. That's continuing to be an issue, more with us than the other two community colleges, but it is going to be a growing issue with them because they have dual credit issues coming from a lot of out-of-county students, and so the question is going to be how do they charge tuition on that. One of the other big things, and President Dunlap talked about the voluntary framework of accountability, but this consortium of community colleges organization has tried to focus on defining the concept of success and completion. And because those concepts, as I think I reported at the last meeting, are different for community colleges than they are for other four-year institutions. And so we're trying to get a step ahead of the game by creating our own definition of what we think is an appropriate measure for completion or success and completion. Those are the main issues that were in our discussion in the latest meeting. We also had a joint meeting with the City of Coeur d'Alene Council, as you heard the report and the letter from Mayor Widmeyer, and it was a productive meeting. We talked about the Four Corners area, what we expect to see, and that includes a strip of land that is the old railroad strip between us and Northwest Boulevard, and so we had a nice discussion about that and what the future is. We had a good report on the trees on the dike. That's why we took it off the agenda here this evening, because we had a pretty complete description of what that issue is. Talked about the future, some of the future uses of the education corridor. The concept of guns on campus came up in terms of is there a role that the city might play in helping us with any policies that we develop in the future. No recommendations or suggestions, just the idea of there's a wide array of issues that need to be explored on this, and it doesn't end just on the campus here. And there was an issue that came up that was discussed about maybe trying to find a gymnasium space that would be shared by not just the city but other school districts and that sort of thing. It was a general concept of discussion that'll probably await some more discussion in the future. The idea of the trees on campus, on the dike that need to be removed, brought forth a discussion about who's going to pay for the remediation, because now we have the study done and it's going to be completed shortly and the report will be out. The discussion developed that we had presentations at our board meetings when we approved paying half of the study cost, that was all we were going to have to pay, that the remediation was going to be paid by the city. Not surprisingly, the city doesn't remember it that way. And it's not because I think they're changing their mind. People, the personalities change, and it is a good example of how when we say and do things in the future, we really should reduce important things to writing so that we have some record of it, we can go back. We are now going to go back through our minutes and try and find where those comments came from so that we can tell the city where we got our information and what we're relying upon. But it's a good example of how simply hearing something from somebody isn't necessarily good enough. It needs to be, and hopefully it'll be in our minutes or in some other record that we have. The president and I and Mark Browning, Mark was at all the meetings we have met with the county commissioners for Benoit, Boundary, Bonner, about out-of-county tuition. This is, it's an interesting discussion because we're trying to develop an understanding of how we can deal with the disparity between what we get from the out-of-county students, the $500, and what the Cooney County taxpayers pay. and how they subsidize the out-of-county students, and that does occur. But when you talk to the county commissioners from the different counties, it's an interesting perspective. The suggestion was made, and I think it's accurate, that there are really three social economic areas here in the 5 northern county area. Benoit and Boundary County and Shoshone County have their own limitations in terms of property value, in terms of number of people, and in terms of the social economic basis upon which they can support students. And Bonner County and Kootenai County obviously have a different social economic basis. So this is not an easy question to try and work our way through. How do we try and create some equality for the Kootenai County taxpayers, because there isn't equality now. There was also discussions about if we do come up with some kind of a way of determining if there's additional money needs to be paid on behalf of the out-of-county students, is there consideration given to the economic benefit that Kootenai County sees from the fact that we have the college here? So again, you can see there's a complexity here that's going to take a long time to work its way out. But I want to report on this because I think it's important that everybody know that we're really trying to find a way to correct this inequity. It will take some time, but we're working hard on it. I'd also like to tell you that we're going to have the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Council in a visit on April 22nd, and they're coming here for a view of the campus. When we were down there meeting with them, they had not done that before. We invited them here, and they're coming, I think all of them. We're going to give them a tour of all the facilities, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and then treat them to a lunch over at the restaurant here with our culinary students, Emery's. But it's a great opportunity for us to continue to work with them as a partner in education. They've been a very good partner for us. There's also going to be a NIC Board of Trustees retreat. During the retreat, the board does self-evaluations and evaluations of personnel, and so that will take place on April 8th. I think that concludes my report. If there are any questions, if not, we can move to remarks for the good of the order, if any. Christie.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to remind the board of the Human Rights Banquet, the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Rights. That is April 28th. I am president of that organization, and we've had a long history with the college, and certainly the college will be provided recognition throughout the evening and scholarships. And so I was hoping to get a feel for who might be attending. I can't tell you who our speaker is. I'm so excited, but it's a secret. And I have to wait for the press release to come out. But it's a great speaker. And we'll be doing some human rights awards. This is not a secret. Honoring our past city council and president, mayor and council for the city of Coeur d'Alene. And so we're excited about that. And then, of course, there's some statewide level recognition that will be going on too. I'm not sure if that's gone public or not, so I won't say anything about that, but some wonderful people in our community will be honored. So I'm hoping that the majority of the board is able to make it for a really memorable, wonderful evening. Does anyone RSVP besides me?
I have.
You have, Judy? Ron, are you in town?
I don't think I'm in town.
Darn it. Todd. Are you coming, Todd?
She's putting everybody in the spot right here.
Yeah.
Are you
We've
coming?
RSVP.
Oh, you have RSVP?
I did.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any more comments for the good of the order?
Just a quick one, Creighton, you might recognize this. In the Trustee Quarterly, there's an article from College of Southern Idaho about a different kind of counseling, where students at the College of Southern Idaho are offered free legal services. Mark, did you catch that? So they can focus on their studies.
I think I do a lot of that myself. I
Thank you for doing
get
that.
a lot of student
It's
calls.
a fun article, and it's in a National Trade Association magazine about College of Southern Idaho, and the folks there that are saying when students are so involved in trying to deal with student issues, it's helpful to have some resources on campus to wend their way through either landlord issues or financial issues or whatever. So it's another positive aspect of what Idaho is doing.
For lack of a better time or place to do it, there was an article in the Sentinel by one of the students, and I've been approached by a number of students, and this is an issue that's come back around about 3 or 4 times. So I'm just going to throw it out there since we're in the process right now, and the timing's probably as good as any. I'd really like the staff to review the hours of the library. Right now, the library closes at 2:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon. It does not open again until 1 p.m. in the afternoon on Sunday. So if a student wanted to access the library Friday 2:30 on, all day Saturday and Sunday morning, the library facility is not available to them. Under the concept of student success, I guess I'd like to see that revisited. I know budgets are tight and money, but I know when I was in college, the library was quite a resource. I know we have more online stuff now than when us dinosaurs were in college, but I think for the folks in the dorm, the accessibility to Molstead would be nice to have more access, let me just put it that way. So I'd really like to see that revisited and looked at very hard to see what we can do to expand those opportunities for the kids to access that facility during the weekend, because we do have some real dedicated students that are,
Any other comments? Thank you. With that, we're adjourned.
Journey.